They were raw, violent, and unapologetically offensive to the establishment. The Grindhouse films of the 1970s didn't care about critics, censors, or the Hollywood code. They wanted to shock you awake. They turned midnight theaters into temples of rebellion. But behind the fake blood and exploitation posters were stories of censorship wars, government bans, and filmmakers who said, "To hell with rules." Let's dive into 13 Grindhouse films that defied everything. Number 13, The Last House on the Left, 1972. When Wes Craven's debut film hit screens in 1972, audiences weren't ready. Marketed with the tagline, "To avoid fainting, keep repeating, it's only a movie," this low-budget Grindhouse thriller became infamous overnight. It looked like a simple revenge story, two parents hunting their daughter's murderers, but what played out on screen was something raw, ugly, and disturbingly real. Shot on a shoestring budget, Craven's unflinching direction and the amateur cast created a sense of documentary-style horror that unnerved everyone. Censors in the United Kingdom and Australia banned it outright, calling it obscene. Even in the United States, theaters were raided, and some prints were seized by police. What the authorities didn't understand was that Craven was holding up a mirror to America's violent psyche during the Vietnam War. Behind the scenes, the crew faced constant moral debates. Craven himself, a former humanities professor, nearly quit several times, disturbed by his own creation. Yet, the film's unfiltered brutality became its weapon. It challenged hypocrisy, media sensationalism, and desensitization. Today, The Last House on the Left is recognized as a defining moment in Grindhouse history. What was once banned as trash cinema is now praised as artful provocation. It taught future filmmakers from Tarantino to Rob Zombie that rebellion could be cinematic. It wasn't just horror. It was a scream from the underbelly of America. Number 12, I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. Few titles triggered as much outrage as I Spit on Your Grave. Released in 1978 and directed by Mayer Zarchi, it became the poster child for what censors called moral depravity. Critics called it worthless. Theaters refused to play it, and entire countries banned it. Yet, decades later, it's studied in film schools as one of the boldest, most disturbing statements of its era. The plot follows a woman seeking revenge after enduring brutal violence, a premise that was seen as unforgivable at the time. What made it explosive wasn't just the story, but its refusal to glamorize pain or offer tidy morality. Zarchi claimed the film was inspired by a real-life incident he witnessed, making it an act of rage, not exploitation. During screenings, audience reactions bordered on chaos. Some walked out. Others screamed at the screen. In the United Kingdom, it was banned under the Video Nasties Law, remaining blacklisted for nearly 20 years. Critics like Roger Ebert called it a vile bag of garbage, but feminist scholars later re-examined it as a grim metaphor for empowerment and trauma. Zarchi financed the film independently, edited it himself, and watched as it was censored, burned, and yet resurrected through underground circulation. Its legacy endures precisely because it refused to play by anyone's rules. In the end, I Spit on Your Grave wasn't just a Grindhouse film. It was a declaration that vengeance, pain, and justice could coexist in the same frame, and no censor could erase that. Number 11, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Few films have ever felt this raw, this real, or this wrong. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre wasn't just a horror movie. It was a full-blown sensory assault that made audiences in 1974 believe they'd stumbled onto something forbidden. Directed by Tobe Hooper on a shoestring budget and shot under sweltering Texas heat, it follows 5 young travelers who make the worst pit stop imaginable, a rundown farmhouse hiding a family of cannibalistic killers. What makes it so disturbing isn't buckets of gore, it's the opposite. Hooper used the illusion of violence, handheld camera work, and documentary-style grit to make every scream and chainsaw roar feel uncomfortably authentic. Leatherface, played by Gunnar Hansen, became an icon of American horror, masked, mute, and terrifyingly human. The film's production was legendary for its misery actors fainted, sets reeked of decay, and real animal bones decorated the interiors. Banned or censored in several countries, it was condemned by critics and worshipped by midnight audiences who couldn't look away. Beneath the chaos, Hooper built a dark satire about consumer culture and the death of rural America, making it far more than a simple slasher. Decades later, it's still one of the purest Grindhouse experiences ever put to film, sweaty, relentless, and impossible to forget. A chainsaw wasn't the only thing cutting that summer, it was cinema itself being torn wide open. Number 10. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980 few films have left audiences as disturbed or changed censorship law quite like Cannibal Holocaust. Directed by Ruggero Deodato, this Italian production was conceived as a savage critique of sensationalist media. Instead, it became one of the most banned and debated films in cinema history. The premise followed a documentary crew that vanishes while filming cannibal tribes in the Amazon. When their footage is found, it reveals their own horrifying behavior, how their supposed journalism turned into barbaric manipulation and cruelty. What shocked audiences wasn't just what they saw, but how real it seemed. Deodato's cinema verite style, complete with shaky handheld cameras, real tribal settings, and unflinching violence, led Italian authorities to arrest him for murder. They genuinely believed the actors had been killed for the camera. Deodato had to bring his cast to court alive to prove his innocence. But the bigger scandal was the film's unfiltered depiction of exploitation, both cultural and cinematic. Censors across Europe and North America banned it for obscenity and animal cruelty. Critics condemned it as perverse, yet scholars later saw its brilliance, a mirror to colonial arrogance and modern voyeurism. Behind the horror, Cannibal Holocaust became an eerie prophecy of today's media ethics, a warning that those documenting brutality often create it. It remains banned in multiple countries, but its influence echoes through everything from the Blair Witch Project to Hostel. In the end, Cannibal Holocaust was never about cannibals, it was about us. Number 9. Thriller, A Cruel Picture, 1973. Before revenge thrillers became mainstream, Sweden unleashed Thriller, A Cruel Picture, a cold-blooded explosion of vengeance and defiance. Known in the US as They Call Her One Eye, this film turned censorship into a target of its own rebellion. The story followed Frigga, a mute young woman exploited and addicted against her will, who transforms into an unstoppable assassin. Her journey from victim to avenger was filmed with both poetic stillness and shocking bursts of violence. Director Bo Arne Vibenius, frustrated by censorship, pushed every boundary imaginable, then pushed harder. Swedish authorities were horrified. Scenes of explicit brutality and moral corruption triggered bans across Europe. Even within the underground circuit, theaters demanded edits. Yet every attempt to censor it only made audiences more curious. Behind the scenes, the actress Christina Lindberg, whose iconic eye patch would later inspire Tarantino's Elle Driver in Kill Bill, delivered a haunting performance of silent rage. Vibenius, allegedly operating under pseudonyms to avoid blacklisting, described the film as a political act against hypocrisy. Critics dismissed it as degenerate, but cult audiences hailed it as revolutionary. By the late 1990s, the film was rediscovered and restored, finally earning recognition for its feminist undertones and fearless commentary on control and retribution. In a world where women's anger was still forbidden, Thriller, A Cruel Picture gave it a loaded gun. Number 8. The Last House on Dead End Street, 1973. Some films whisper rebellion. This one screamed it through the projector. The Last House on Dead End Street wasn't just banned, it was practically erased from history. Directed by Roger Watkins under multiple aliases, this nightmarish underground film redefined the limits of what Grindhouse cinema could be. The plot followed a disgruntled filmmaker, fresh out of prison, who decides to film actual murders for profit. Shot on 16mm with grainy footage, flickering light, and surreal editing, it felt less like fiction and more like a cursed snuff reel. Censors didn't know what to do with it. The violence felt too real. The film's disjointed narrative, grotesque visuals, and nihilistic tone terrified distributors. Rumors spread that real victims had been used. Some theaters played it under fake titles. Others burned the reels after local authorities intervened. Behind the scenes, Watkins, a film student at the time, claimed the movie was born from anger toward capitalist exploitation in both cinema and society. He used friends as actors, shooting in abandoned factories and warehouses, creating something that felt both anarchic and personal. For decades, The Last House on Dead End Street was thought lost. Then, in the early 1990s, a surviving print surfaced, reigniting fascination with its mythic reputation. Today, it's recognized not just as a horror experiment, but as a raw cry of creative rage against censorship and conformity. It didn't seek approval. It demanded you look away, and yet, no one could. Number 7. Coffy, 1973. When mainstream Hollywood ignored black voices, Coffy smashed through the door and the censors. Directed by Jack Hill and starring the indomitable Pam Grier, this film wasn't just Grindhouse, it was revolution wrapped in leather and attitude. The premise followed Coffy, a nurse turned vigilante after her sister falls victim to drug pushers. Armed with a shotgun and a righteous fury, she hunts down corrupt politicians, crooked cops, and ruthless dealers. It was raw, it was fast, and it was dangerous. But the controversy wasn't just about violence, it was about power. For the first time, audiences saw a black woman, not as a victim, but as the one delivering justice. Censors balked at the film's brutal realism, its language, and its unapologetic portrayal of urban decay. Some critics dismissed it as too militant, others accused it of glorifying violence. Behind the scenes, Greer performed her own stunts and infused the role with lived-in authenticity. Director Jack Hill battled studios that wanted to tone down the grit, but he refused. The result was a film that broke box office records for its genre while breaking cultural taboos on race and gender. Its legacy is undeniable. Coffy inspired an entire wave of blaxploitation films and laid the groundwork for strong female action heroes decades later. It taught censors and audiences that strength and fury could wear heels and an afro. In a decade of rebellion, Coffy didn't just fight corruption, she burned it down. Number 6. The Big Bird Cage, 1972. Deep in the Philippine jungles, another Jack Hill, Pam Grier collaboration exploded onto Grindhouse screens. The Big Bird Cage. On the surface, it was a pulp prison drama. Underneath, it was a riot against repression. The film followed Terry, a political prisoner trapped in a brutal women's labor camp run by a sadistic warden and corrupt guards. When revolutionaries infiltrate the prison to incite a mass breakout, chaos, explosions, and revenge follow. The tagline said it best: "Women so hot with desire they melt the chains that enslave them." Censors hated it instantly. Its mix of satire, rebellion, and revenge set in a tropical inferno was too wild to categorize. In some countries, it was banned outright for inciting moral corruption. In others, heavy edits removed its political undertones and raw intensity. Behind the camera, Hill and Grier used the Grindhouse framework to criticize real oppression, turning exploitation tropes into weapons of commentary. The film's low-budget, dusty realism and relentless energy made it feel like both a parody and a warning. Critics dismissed it as sleaze, but fans saw something deeper: a story about captivity, revolution, and liberation wrapped in outrageous spectacle. Today, The Big Bird Cage is celebrated for its audacity, a feminist and political allegory hiding beneath the grit. It dared to shout what others whispered: freedom always comes at a cost. Number 5. Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, 1975. If one film tested the limits of taste, censorship, and endurance, it was Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS. Shot on leftover sets from Hogan's Heroes, this Canadian exploitation shocker from Don Edmonds shocked even hardened Grindhouse fans. The premise was pure nightmare. A sadistic Nazi warden conducts human experiments to prove women can withstand more pain than men. Yet beyond its pulp horror exterior lay a ferocious indictment of fascism, cruelty, and unchecked authority. When it premiered, Ilsa was immediately banned across most of Europe and Canada. The outrage was global. Germany refused to even acknowledge its existence, while the UK condemned it as beyond the bounds of decency. American distributors faced FBI pressure for obscenity violations. Behind the mayhem stood Diane Thorne, whose magnetic performance turned Ilsa into an icon of forbidden cinema, a symbol of tyranny and control. The film's shocking realism led to rumors of illegal production, while theaters that dared to screen it faced police raids. Critics hated it. Audiences couldn't look away. Grindhouse theaters packed nightly, transforming it into a forbidden ritual of rebellion. Over time, historians reinterpreted Ilsa as a grotesque satire, a film exposing the perverse machinery of power rather than glorifying it. It remains one of the most censored films ever made, yet also one of the most studied. Love it or loathe it, Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS proved one thing: censorship only makes the roar louder. Number 4. Death Race 2000, 1975. If there was ever a film that laughed in the face of censorship and government fear, it was Death Race 2000. Produced by the legendary Roger Corman and directed by Paul Bartel, this chaotic masterpiece turned political satire into high-speed anarchy. Set in a dystopian future where the United States is ruled by a totalitarian regime, the film followed a cross-country race where drivers earned points by running over pedestrians. Its star-studded cast included a young David Carradine and a pre-Rocky Sylvester Stallone, both embodying the absurdity and rage of an America obsessed with violence as entertainment. Censors didn't see satire, they saw sedition. The film's outrageous premise and gleeful carnage were accused of promoting immorality and sadism. Some theaters refused to play it, while others were raided after protests. Yet, under the chaos, Death Race 2000 mocked corporate greed, political propaganda, and desensitization decades before those themes became mainstream. Behind the scenes, Corman encouraged improvisation and guerrilla filmmaking to keep costs low and adrenaline high. The result was a movie that felt part road film, part comic book, part revolution. Critics didn't know what to do with it. Pauline Kael called it sleazy, brilliance, and that phrase stuck. Over time, the film's cult grew massive. Its sequels, remakes, and homages continue to echo through modern, dystopian cinema. What was once condemned as trash now stands as one of the smartest satires of the 1970s, a middle finger to censorship disguised as a demolition derby. Death Race 2000 didn't just cross the finish line, it burned it down behind them. Number 3. Switchblade Sisters, 1975. Switchblade Sisters wasn't just rebellion, it was revolution wearing eyeliner and denim. Directed by Jack Hill, this underappreciated Grindhouse gem told the story of the Dagger Debs, an all-female street gang navigating violence, loyalty, and betrayal in a decaying urban jungle. The film combined comic book energy with Shakespearean tragedy. When Lace, the gang's tough-as-nails leader, is betrayed by her best friend, their sisterhood erupts into an all-out gang war. It was loud, bloody, and bursting with female rage, but Hollywood didn't want angry women on screen. Censors labeled it too violent and morally irresponsible. Some prints were cut, others never made it out of limited theatrical runs. The public dismissed it as exploitation, missing its deeper subtext, a mirror reflecting the disillusionment of the 1970s youth, where rebellion was both survival and identity. Behind the camera, Hill faced resistance from every angle. Studio heads demanded rewrites and softer tones, but he refused. Pam Grier, originally slated for a cameo, publicly supported the film's fearless portrayal of women taking control of chaos. When Quentin Tarantino re-released it under his Rolling Thunder Pictures label in the 1990s, Switchblade Sisters finally got the recognition it deserved. Critics now call it a punk feminist cult classic. Its message remains timeless. Censorship can silence a scream, but not a revolution. Number 2. The Crazies, 1973. Before Dawn of the Dead cemented George A. Romero as a master of social horror, The Crazies showcased his fiercest confrontation with censorship and paranoia. The plot centered on a small Pennsylvania town accidentally contaminated by a military bioweapon known as Trixie. As madness spreads, the government swoops in not to save lives, but to bury evidence. The result is a grim reflection of state power gone rogue. Released in the shadow of Vietnam and Watergate, The Crazies was too political for comfort. Censors demanded cuts, calling it unpatriotic and anti-military. Many theaters refused to screen it, fearing public unrest. Its marketing was sabotaged, and for decades it languished in obscurity. Behind the scenes, Romero poured his frustration with government corruption into every frame. His cast, mostly unknowns, were filmed in real towns, using locals as extras to heighten realism. The handheld cinematography gave it the feel of a documentary gone mad. Critics didn't get it. Audiences didn't know what to make of it. Yet, years later, when the film resurfaced on midnight circuits, it was hailed as prophetic. Scholars praised its depiction of systemic decay and moral collapse. Today, The Crazies stands as one of the most fearless works of the Grindhouse era, a film that looked censorship straight in the eye and refused to blink. It wasn't just horror. It was rebellion wrapped in a hazmat suit. Number 1. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. No Grindhouse film or any film of its time embodied the war against censorship more completely than Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. Adapted from Anthony Burgess's dystopian novel, it blurred the line between art and anarchy, morality and madness. It wasn't meant for the faint-hearted, it was meant to provoke. The story followed Alex DeLarge, a young sociopath who leads a gang of thrill-seeking delinquents through a decaying future Britain. Their acts of cruelty and chaos lead Alex to government experimentation, a process meant to cure his free will through psychological conditioning. Kubrick turned the tale into a kaleidoscope of surreal violence, classical music, and biting satire. When it premiered in 1971, it detonated like a bomb. Critics called it psychotic genius. Censors called it dangerous to society. In the United Kingdom, reports surfaced of copycat crimes, allegedly inspired by the film. Under mounting pressure, Kubrick himself withdrew it from circulation, a self-imposed ban that lasted nearly 3 decades. In America, the MPAA initially slapped it with an X rating. Entire sequences were trimmed, and even then, religious groups protested nationwide. Some theaters were vandalized, others required police presence during screenings. Yet beneath the outrage was something profound, an unflinching critique of state control, media manipulation, and moral hypocrisy. Behind the scenes, Kubrick meticulously planned every frame. His stylized vision, contrasting horror with elegance, turned A Clockwork Orange into a psychological Rorschach test. Was it glamorizing evil or exposing it? The question divided critics for decades. By the late 1990s, it was finally restored and re-released to global acclaim. Modern filmmakers from Darren Aronofsky to Christopher Nolan cite it as a cornerstone of cinematic rebellion. In the end, A Clockwork Orange wasn't censored because it was obscene, it was censored because it told the truth. It showed that society's need for control was far more terrifying than its criminals. Kubrick didn't just defy the censors, he outsmarted them. In the Grindhouse theaters of the 1970s, censorship wasn't a wall, it was a challenge. These 13 films proved that rebellion can be art, and that the ugliest truths often hide behind the brightest marquees. So which of these underground legends shocked you most? Tell us in the comments, and if you love the wild, the banned, and the forgotten, don't forget to like and subscribe.